So I remember I started having sex with this girl at university. This was years and years and years ago. That the circumstances in which it started to happen really convinced me, looking retrospectively back at that situation, the individual that you begin to exchange, I know this sounds crass, but fluids with, or hormones with, might be a more accurate representation of what I'm trying to describe here, really has an influence on your endocrine system as well. And I was around, I think, 21 when this was happening, maybe 20. And this was like Freshers Week, so you can imagine the kind of debauchery that I got up to back then. I certainly considered myself to be less of a, let's say, enlightened, for lack of a better word, person than perhaps I am now. And I'd actually just broken up with a long-term girlfriend prior to going to university. I was really ruthless in that time then. I started to say, look, hey, I'm going to university, distance, this isn't going to work, so we should probably quit while we're ahead. And within like the first 2 weeks, I really got into this girl, mentally and physically, I guess you can say, pause, who lived on the flat below me, actually. And we started having regular intercourse, and she wasn't on birth control at that time, so I had to rub her up. And I remember as our courtship, relationship, situationship, whatever you want to call it, started to progress, and we started to sleep with each other more frequently, sort of every single day. The topic started to get into the manner of getting on birth control. So she did. She thought it was a good idea, and I had no understanding of the repercussions and the damage that this can do, not just to herself, women taking birth control, but also men who are having sex with women who are equally taking on birth control. And I recall it's really interesting looking back at this particular situation in regards to my particular behavior towards this individual. Remember, I went into my university career, I guess you could say, with the idea that I'm going to be pretty much promiscuous. I wanted to extend the scope of my, let's say, sexual capacity. Pretty much degenerate. And I was very, very firm on that idea. And I had also communicated to her that, hey, look, this isn't going to be romantic in any capacity. We are purely just enjoying each other's company and enjoying each other's body, to be very, very transparent. And I recall the time she started to get on birth control, the weeks that preceded that particular event, I started to change dramatically in respect to my my earlier proclamation on what our relationship would be. And I turned into the kind of man that I hate, that I despise, that I couldn't ever imagine myself entertaining any of these habits. I became so possessive. I would be doing the most insane stuff, like, and I, it really makes me cringe looking back at this, but going through her phone to making sure that she wasn't sleeping with anybody else. I even recall following her around a nightclub, even though I wasn't even planning to go out. I turned into this possessive maniac. And again, behavior that I would never consider consistent with my character earlier to my initial proclamation of how I wanted to behave, because I was entertaining more female company other than her at that time. And then my hormone, my temperament started to change when she started to get on birth control and we started having regular intercourse. And what's the point? What's the point? What's the premise I'm really trying to share here is that imagine this situation, looking at it very, very logically from the body's perspective. You begin to court a woman who is not on birth control, right? So she's fertile. If you have sex with her, you can, impregnate her, have a child. You understand. Hopefully you understand how that works. And then after that initial period of regular intercourse, she begins to induce into her system birth control. What does birth control do? Birth control essentially convinces the body that it's already pregnant and therefore cannot get pregnant again. So imagine that perspective, right? You're having sex with a woman who is fertile. She then introduces something that says she is no longer fertile because she is with child. What might you imagine could be the implications on the masculine counterpart in terms of his endocrinology, his hormone system? That he has been with a woman who has been fertile, and now her hormones are telling you she's pregnant with what? Your child. So imagine my pleasant surprise, the logical consistency with that idea on how I was behaving. I was essentially entering, and by the way, don't be delusional into thinking that this has no repercussions on your endocrine system equally. I do believe science has to catch up in this regard. I don't believe this is something that we're going to be able to find overnight, but there is a lot of consistent evidence showing that husbands who have wives who are pregnant, their hormone profile changes. Their testosterone, I believe it goes down. You even get these really adverse reactions where men start to mimic the hormone profile of their pregnant spouses. Their estrogen levels go up, and they almost mirror their partner's endocrinology. So it made logical sense to me that my temperament began to change very, very dramatically. I began to become very, very possessive, very, very territorial. And again, I hate this character that I began to embody. So essentially, this video is a reaction to one of the YouTube posts that I did a couple of weeks ago in regards to if you're having sex with a woman on birth control, you're also on birth control. In that way, you are absorbing some of these foreign toxins, agents, hormones into your body equally, that is communicating with your endocrine system and changing your inner chemistry. So, what is the antidote to this? I'm a firm believer in more raw, natural, least invasive ways to court. One of the I wouldn't say easiest ones, but one of the logical ones that I will proclaim on this channel is, of course, just because you have sex doesn't mean you need to ejaculate. Of course, this requires a high degree of control and exercise of restraint on your behalf, but it's very, very possible. And I actually think it's easier than a lot of people believe it is. I will signpost the various options like my sexual energy mastery course, which is in the which is below. Equally, Cupid's poison arrow, anything by Mantak Chia. There's lots of resources that start to describe the process of what I'm trying to allude to, the idea of tantra, white tantra more specifically. Of course, that doesn't mean you can't engage in, let's call it, modern intercourse, whereby you still have the fireworks at the end of the session. But it might just mean you need to rubber up. And I think this is probably the best form of contraception, especially if you're using products that are very natural. Of course, there are other things you can do in terms of tracking period cycles, where women are less fertile or less likely to become pregnant, depending on when you're having intercourse within the month. That is an area of research I probably need to do a little bit more due diligence into. But I wanted to share with you that little story. I'm curious if you guys have had anything similar. Of course, there's this very common narrative about this idea when a woman comes off birth control, typically a lot of problems start occurring in the relationship because her mating preferences will drastically change dependent on when she feels she is fertile and when she is not. That is real. That is not a theory. That is not made up. That is an objective fact. There was a study done that showed that women prefer men's facial features, particularly disposed to more angular masculine features when she is fertile as opposed to when she's not fertile. When she's on birth control, when she's off birth control comparatively when she's on birth control, which is why you see a lot of problems starting to happen in modern relationships when they start to change their their birth control options. So I'm really curious if you guys have had not too dissimilar experiences from mine, and if you do, I'd be welcome to hear them, and if you could share them equally. But I truly believe in the next maybe 50, 100, 200 years that we're going to look back on the mess that we are making inside our bodies with introducing some of these very foreign agents into our biology, into our endocrinology, and we're going to reap the consequences of those particular decisions. And I always like to say, like I've dated women on birth control, on and off birth control for a long time, and I remember saying to my latest long-term girlfriend of around 5 years that if you told me to take something that was going to mess with my endocrine system, I would say no, absolutely not. So I think that is a preference, that is an option that you shouldn't neglect in regards to your courting process, and if you are going to introduce a monogamous or looking to introduce a monogamous relationship long term into your life. Some theories, some facts there, gentlemen. Speak soon.